So let's get to it. Let's hear George Soros. First off, let's just introduce ourselves to George Soros, and none of what you see here is going to be at all surprising. And here he's talking about Donald Trump, who is the antithesis of everything that George Soros stands for, such as every Western nation drowning in a sea of mass migration and just far left radical progressive policies on just every single issue, as we shall see. Let's take a listen.
President Trump is a con man and the ultimate narcissist who wants the world to revolve around him. When his fantasy of becoming president came true, his narcissism developed a pathological dimension. President Trump is a con man.
So Trump is a con man. I wonder how George Soros made his money. Let's take a look. How did George Soros break the Bank of England? This is how he made his money. George Soros is one of the most successful and influential investors in history. He is also known for his philanthropic and political activities. Well, we will be getting into that, as well as his controversial views on various issues. But perhaps his most famous achievement was his role in the 1992 currency crisis that forced the British government to withdraw from the European exchange rate mechanism and devalue its currency, the pound sterling. So, the event, which occurred on September 16th, 1992, is known as Black Wednesday. So they don't usually name happy occasions Black whatever, right? It earned Soros the nickname of the man who broke the Bank of England. And as we go through this, I think you'll find that Trump has actually never done anything remotely as bad as this. George Soros is said to have broken the Bank of England and precipitated the Black Wednesday in the UK in September 1992 as a result of massive bets he made against the British pound. So you're going to become suspicious of his motives and his character as we go through this. As a consequence, the pound rapidly devalued, leading to an estimated $1 billion profit for Soros and his quantum fund. And could it be an any more James Bond evil sounding organization? Could George Soros's quantum fund sound any more like an evil James Bond villain organization? I don't think that it could. It's probably why he named it that. The withdrawal from the ERM was a humiliating defeat for Britain's government and a major blow to its credibility and reputation. It also caused economic turmoil and social unrest in Britain. Social unrest is something that seems to follow George Soros around, we will find out. As interest rates remained high, inflation rose, unemployment increased, and public spending was cut. It also damaged the reputation of British Prime Minister John Major and the Conservative Party for ineffective fiscal management. But it was George Soros doing something very intentional. Interest rates remained high, inflation rose, unemployment increased, public spending was cut. So this hurt people. It hurt millions of people. It was done on purpose for profit. What did George Soros say about Trump?
President Trump is a con man.
Really? Because he didn't do this. He didn't break the Bank of England. What was the impact of Black Wednesday? Black Wednesday on George Soros. Soros became very wealthy, but also infamous for his role in Black Wednesday. He was praised by some as a genius and visionary and criticized by others as a greedy and ruthless speculator, who exploited the weaknesses of the system and caused harm to millions of people for money. He was also accused of having a political agenda behind his actions, as he was a vocal supporter of European integration and a critic of Britain's reluctance to join the euro. You see, you keep seeing these globalist themes, right? These anti-nationalist, anti-self-deterministic ideas, this ideology of, well, The perfect word for it is globalism. Nobody has a choice anymore. It's all decided somewhere centrally. Somebody's going to decide what your life is going to be like. And for George Soros, he thinks it should be the Open Society Foundations. Let's move on a little bit here. Hungarian PM Viktor Orban. Now, that's George Soros's native country, and they don't like him very much there. Let's hear what he has to say about George Soros.
I know George Soros very well. He is my opponent. He believes in none of the things that we do. And he has an army at his service. Money, NGOs, universities, research institutions, and half the bureaucracy in Brussels. He uses this army to force his will on his opponents, like us Hungarians. He thinks that the values dear to all of us led to the horrors of the 20th century. But the case is exactly the opposite. Our values save us from repeating history's mistakes. The horrors of Nazis and communism happened because some Western states in continental Europe abandoned their Christian values. And today's progressives are planning to do the same.
Anyway, he's not welcome in Hungary because Hungary does not want his millions. They do not want to be flooded with the millions of migrants that he wants to send there. So this has made him an enemy of Orban, but this has made him an enemy of Soros, but also of the of Brussels, of the EU. Here is Orban again. Let's hear this.
I do remember how Mr. George Soros published his plan in English in a Project Syndicate publication. It was done 2015, September 26. And he published a plan. He said that he is I'm quoting, here are the 6 components of my comprehensive plan. I just quote 2 or 3 points of that. First is, he said very clearly, 2015, that, quoting again, EU has to accept at least 1 million asylum seekers annually. That was the first point. Second, he said, adequate financing is critical. And he proposed to issue long-term euro bonds for financing the migration crisis and the migrants' social and welfare taking care when they arrive to the European Union. And another point which is very important for Hungary, which is involving the territory of Hungary directly into this program, he said that, quoting them, safe channels must be established for asylum seekers, starting with getting them from Greece and Italy to their destination countries, which means to bring them to Greece, to Hungary, and then have them to go to Austria. So don't forget that what we are speaking about is not an accidental stories, not a bulk of 10 years of accidental stories. It's a plan which is going on. It was written.
Yeah, so this is something we're all familiar with, just this globalist idea that you do not control your borders. You don't control who comes in. Globalists do. Let's take a look at the Open Society Foundation's website. So what are they all about? What do they say that they're about? The Open Society Foundations, founded by George Soros, are the world's largest private funder of independent groups working for what? Rights, equity, and justice. So, as we know, that in progressive world, these words don't mean what they mean to us. They mean something else, right? Like as soon as you see equity, that's intentionally used. The word equity is intentionally used in place of equality, right? Which means that the rights are not rights as we see them. They're rights that are handed out depending on equity standards, the progressive stack. Justice, the word justice is not the way that we see justice, right? Justice is guided by equity in the Open Society Foundation's world. As we'll see from the DAs that George Soros has funded in the United States. Definitely a different definition of the word justice. Justice is social justice, which is not justice. We're going to get to that later. I want to take a look at the history because we can see the Open Society Foundation began in the late 70s, 1979, and we'll see there's a progression in its purpose over the decades. So, 1979, starting to build a more open world. And before we get there, too, open society foundations. When you think of open society, the standard definition would be, free speech, rule of law, like your rights protected by rule of law, economic freedom. That's not what they mean. That's not what the Open Society Foundations means by open society. We know that within the progressive world, every word has been redefined in an Orwellian way to mean something else, not what it used to mean. So, 1979, George Soros, the founder and chair of Open Society Foundations, begins his philanthropic work, funding scholarships for Black university students in South Africa during apartheid and for dissidents in communist Eastern Europe to study in the West. Today, his foundations fund groups and individuals around the world. And we'll see something interesting. There's a shift towards communism. There's a shift away from actual liberalization in a place like the Soviet Union or the former Soviet Union, to actually now promotion of the same ideas that they were dissenting against decades ago. This is part of the evolution of the Open Society's foundations, encouraging dissent behind the Iron Curtain. George Soros opens a foundation in Hungary, which would eventually lead to the establishment of the Open Society Foundations Network. The foundations seek to expand people's access to information in Eastern Europe and Russia, including by distributing photocopiers to independent groups to break the Communist Party's grip on information. And they seem to have just done a 180 on this, because the kind of people that they support now, like Chesa Bodine in San Francisco, who's no longer there, he was recalled, but also like Zoran Mamdani in New York City, these people are just full-on communists. That's who's getting the money and the support now. But you can see there's an evolution. It changed. Supporting democracy in China. They don't really do that anymore. Fostering open societies in the former Soviet bloc. So again, under the old definition, the real definition of open societies, liberalization into by liberalization, I mean in the old sense of, open markets, personal freedom, free speech, rule of law, the state protects your rights. So that was 1989. 1991, Central European University opens its doors. Let's go to now. Or actually, even back here at 1994, you can start to see some changes. Some very progressive changes. And as we know, progressivism is not compatible with open society. Backing new thinking on global drug policy. So here we go. Open Society launches the Linda Smith Center, a policy research institute dedicated to promoting a new approach to drug policy, one focused on healthcare provision and protection rather than on punishment and prohibition. And it is not worked out in San Francisco or LA or any major city, certainly not any major city in Canada, Vancouver, Toronto. This was a major problem, but you can see where it starts to move in that really left-wing progressive direction. Bringing end-of-life care out of the shadows. Well, that's progressed in Canada to the point where they just want to kill you if you're depressed. You can start to see where it's moving here over the decades. Here we go, 1996, focusing on threats to the open society in the United States. I found this very interesting. So you see a bit of a shift in the language here, focusing on threats to the open society in the United States. So what do they mean by that? Do they mean that the United States is an open society, or does it kind of feel like threats to George Soros's view of what the United States should be? The Open Society Foundation definition of idea of what the United States should be, as in threats to the influence of the Open Society Foundation in the United States. You see this shift happening over the years. Open Society expands in the United States, formally establishing a U.S. program to guide its work. Its initial objectives include challenging a racially discriminatory justice system and the associated mass incarcerations of Black Americans, supporting reproductive rights and advocating for humane and just immigration policies. This is all leading up to Krasner in Philadelphia, Chesa Bodine in San Francisco, and the others that we'll go over. Kim Fox. See, this is getting very progressive now. And as it gets more progressive, obviously it becomes more Marxist and more divorced from what they were doing back here, like in 1986, supporting democracy in China, fostering open societies in the former Soviet bloc. It becomes more divorced from that. Maybe it was the goal all along. Very into the European Union. So what Canadians don't understand. So Mark Carney keeps talking about the EU and how we need to get closer to the EU, and that Canada's the most European of the non-European countries. And coincidentally, there's also been polls coming out just out of nowhere, just for some reason. I guess just somebody had some interest in just putting out some polls and asking, hey, would you like to be part of the European Union? What Canadians don't understand and is that when you join the European Union, you give up sovereignty over trade, over your borders. So the European Union will decide how many people go into your country, who goes into your country. They will set your trade. You will no longer be negotiating trade yourself. It will be up to the European Union. It'll be up to people in Brussels doing it for you. So the European Union is failing. It's going to fall apart. But George Soros is very for this because he's a globalist, right? Globalists are not for sovereign states. They like central planning and getting as many countries under the same umbrella as possible. All subject to the dictates of, the same cabal, small cabal of globalists. Countering discrimination towards Muslims. The response to the attacks in the United States on September 11th, 2001, and subsequent terror events in Europe catalyzed a new wave of hostility and violence towards Muslims in the United States and Europe. This is 2001. This is when the word Islamophobia came into vogue, and that was one of the worst things that could happen to the Western world, certainly to Europe. It has had catastrophic effects in Europe. The word Islamophobia, people not being able to accurately describe reality or talk sensibly about the future, about cultures, about assimilation. Yeah, but George Soros was all over this. The world, certainly the Western world, could have saved itself a lot of suffering in the past, right now, and in the future if this hadn't been pushed. If this hadn't been pushed on everybody, if people hadn't been told that it was somehow wrong just to accurately describe the world and to have rational conversations about the future. So as you can see, the Open Societies Foundation has been behind a lot of very bad ideas, has been funding a lot of damaging ideas. All right, what else do we got here? So as you see, there's a bunch of humanitarian stuff here. How much of this is just to spread ideology? I don't know. I assume they probably do some good with that. So 2015, helping refugees and migrants flee war and poverty. And where? To Europe, flooding into Europe. We just heard Viktor Orban talking about that. Soros was extremely and is still extremely determined to flood Europe with as many people as possible. Here they show families. We know the reality. It wasn't a bunch of women and families. It was military-aged men by themselves. They left their families at home. They left the women at home. They were economic migrants looking for social programs because these social programs would be better than actually working in their home country. Right? Yes, there were families that left, but as we saw, the majority were just single men, young military-aged men. They don't tell you that. They don't tell you that. If you want to know, this is the main reason why Soros is so hated in Europe and why somebody like Viktor Orban hates him so much. Again, reducing harm from drug use. It has not gone well in San Francisco, LA, and any city where harm management has been instituted, expanding drug policy debate through art. They will never give up on these terrible ideas, by the way. Never. Doesn't matter how many people die. Doesn't matter if you have an order of magnitude greater level of overdoses and human tragedy, like in the streets of Vancouver, for instance. No, it just wasn't far left enough. Wasn't Open Society's foundation enough. Let's see, they had to move to Berlin because they got kicked out of Hungary. Art is an engine for social change. The art world is 100% Marxist at this point. Investing in racial justice. Here you go. So you can see what you can see what it is. Rapid response to the global pandemic. Get that jab. Building black power. There's the Black Lives Matter communist fist. So you can see the change over the years. It is something different than what it was at the beginning. All right, so there you go. Now you have a good idea of what the Open Society was and what it is now. Organizations funded directly by George Soros and his Open Society Foundation. Let's take a look at this. Let's see. Air America, I think it's now a defunct progressive radio station. Let's see. America Votes. America's Voice, that's a left-wing thing. These are all left-wing, by the way. American Bar Association, Commission on Immigration Policy. See, he's spreading money to all of these organizations that will promote basically open borders, that will make it more difficult to get people that are in your country illegally out. The American Civil Liberties Union, of course, used to be a very respected organization, and not anymore. I had something on them. This was from June 6, 2021. Once a bastion of free speech, the ACLU faces an identity crisis. An organization that has defended the First Amendment rights of the Nazis and the Ku Klux Klan is split by an internal debate over whether supporting progressive causes is more important. That means that the ACLU is no longer has any value in a free society. In an open society, you might say. You'd think that something that was called Open Society Foundations wouldn't fund a civil liberties group that was essentially pro censorship, and that was not equal in its defense of civil liberties. A law professor argued that the free speech rights of the far right were not worthy of defense by the ACLU, and that black people experienced offensive speech far more viscerally than white allies. In the hallway outside, an ACLU official argued it was perfectly legitimate for his lawyers to decline to defend hate speech. Okay, so if you refuse to defend hate speech, you're not for free speech. You're useless as an organization. You're useless as a civil liberties organization. The ACLU is now useless. It is just simply a political. It's a partisan arm of left-wing politics now. That's it. It's no longer serves the function that it's supposed to serve in a free society, an open society, you might say. This is what happens we've talked about this ad infinitum, right? So when an organization gets taken over, gets first infected and then totally taken over by the mind virus, by the mind infection, the idea pathogen, it seeks to be about its original purpose. Now it's just about spreading wokeness. Now it's just about promoting wokeness, promoting far leftism, promoting radical leftism. Right? Once it goes woke, well, you know what happens.
Everything woke turns to shit.
He was right then. He's even more right now. The ACLU, America's high temple of free speech and civil liberties, has emerged as a muscular and richly funded progressive powerhouse in recent years, taking on the Trump administration in more than 400 lawsuits. But only the Trump administration. The organization finds itself riven with internal tensions over whether it has stepped away from a founding principle, unwavering devotion to the First Amendment it has, and now it's now just political. It is now just political. It is no longer has any value as a civil liberties union. But let's get back. So this whole list is just all of this. I wonder how much Open Societies Foundation's money influenced the ACLU. We're not going to go through all of these, but as you can see, it's an enormous amount of organizations directly funded. So this isn't that they gave money to, say, Move On, right? Partisan organization, and they gave money to somebody else, Black Lives Matter or something like that. No, these are just direct. So this money will have spread out from here. I mean, here, Democracy Now, of course, just that commie TV station in New York. Of course, they get it. Democratic Party. So I guess just directly it's as well as is good as well. Just directly to the Democrats. Southern Poverty Law Center, who's been sued a bunch of times for lying about people. What this is, money is influence. This is influence. This is influencing countries. This is influencing cultures, right? This is all influence. This is all trying to put a little woke mind virus seed in every single person's head. This is to control politicians. This is to control institutions. That's what this is, okay? This is malevolence. This is not just a list of organizations. What do we got here? The George Soros' Open Society Foundations has been linked to mass immigration advocacy through its funding of organizations and initiatives that promote liberal immigration policies. Really, this is far left immigration policies, refugee rights, and pathways to citizenship. OSF has provided significant financial support to groups advocating for immigration reform, including amnesty for undocumented immigrants, and opposition to strict border enforcement. So obviously he would have loved Biden, right? I wonder if he talked directly to Biden, because Biden did exactly what he wants, what he's been spending his billions of dollars trying to promote and trying to realize. Immigrant Legal Resource Center received nearly $7 million between 2016 and 2022, with grants aimed at encouraging naturalization, assisting with the process, and mobilizing civic partnership or participation among immigrants. It also works to prevent deportations and supports initiatives like Citizenship Works, United We Dream, 700,000. Support for amnesty, defunding of immigration and customs enforcement. That's ICE. That's ICE, folks. He's giving $700,000 to defund for support for amnesty and defunding immigration customs enforcement and Customs and Border Patrol. He's giving money to an organization trying to get rid of ICE and Customs and Border Patrol. I said malevolent, right? Anyway, you can see where this is all going. There's tons of it. Loads and loads and loads and loads of it. So you know where he's at, right? He was thrilled at what was happening under Biden. World Economic Forum. We don't like them, right? We're not friends with them. We don't like the World Economic Forum. Guess who likes the World Economic Forum? Let's see. Oh, here's something written by George Soros, published by the World Economic Forum. So, I mean, for me, this is just enough right here, right? Don't like them. Could Europe tackle the refugee crisis with surge funding? So let's see. All those people that they never should have taken, that they didn't have an obligation to take, they should just, instead of just not doing it or sending them back, bankrupt themselves for it. That seems great. What is George Soros worried about? He wants to spend a bunch of money up front on moving the third world to Europe. The most dangerous consequences of the crisis, including anti-immigrant sentiment. That's the most dangerous consequence of the migrant crisis into Europe, not surging crime and people being blown up and just stabbed in the street while somebody yells Allahu Akbar. Not that. The most dangerous consequences of the crisis include anti-immigrant sentiment. And let's see, xenophobia and disaffection. Disaffection towards constructive outcomes like losing your country. Constructive outcomes that benefit refugees and the recipient countries alike. It's not working out that way. This is a big reason why the EU is falling apart. Any of this sounding familiar? This might as well just be AOC. Has he funded AOC? I'm sure he probably has. But my point is, when you see stuff like this, hold on, stuff like this, organizations that have received funding from Soros, I don't think this is even up to date, by the way. Every one of these is there to plant little globalist seeds in everybody's minds, right? Look at all these. That's an enormous amount of influence of malevolent Tides Foundation there, an enormous amount of I think malevolent influence. Yes, he's talking about Europe bankrupting itself to move the Middle East to Europe. This enhances the merits of having recourse to the EU's largely unused AAA credit. Just use Europe's AAA credit to move the third world to Europe. No big deal. Oh, when was this, by the way? Let's look at the date on this again. This was hold on. February 18th, 2016. And it has not gone well. Not gone well for Europe. The migration crisis poses an existential threat to the EU. Indeed, with the North pitted against the South and the East confronting the West, the EU is coming apart at the seams. I wonder what could help. I wonder if moving all of Africa and Syria into Europe, if that'll help. Let's see. That'll solve that will solve the existential threat to the EU. I mean, it's just unbelievable. That'll keep the EU from coming apart at the seams. When should the EU's AAA credit be mobilized, if not for at a moment when the EU is in mortal danger? Let's see, coming apart at the seams, in mortal danger, not do the insane thing or go bankrupt funding the insane thing. It's an easy answer to me. So this is testimony before the Subcommittee on Delivering on Government Efficiency, the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform, United States House of Representatives, Wednesday, February 26, 2025. So this year, USAID's troubling ties to the left's dark money network. So I just searched for Soros in here, and guess what? He's there. Of course he is. USAID spending has long dovetailed that of Hungarian-American billionaire George Soros and others in the left's dark money network, and that is no accident. In 2001, the Soros Foundation's network listed USAID among its donor partners. USAID was is this any big surprise to anybody watching? USAID, of course, gave money to George Soros's Open Society Foundations. It's among its donor partners, alongside other government aid agencies in countries such as Britain, Canada, Netherlands, Switzerland, Germany, and Austria. So from December 16th, 2021, this is the New York Post. How George Soros funded progressive legal arsonist DAs behind U.S. crime surge. So what do we have? Trying to flood the United States and Europe, every Western country, with mass immigration. We have him funding extremely far-left progressive causes, such as racial justice, far-left DAs. What are the consequences of this? And by the way, I'm not seeing anything he's doing, at least in the last 20 years, that's positive for just regular people in any way. For the last several years, billionaire philanthropist George Soros has been quietly financing a revolution in criminal justice reform, doling out millions of dollars to progressive candidates and district attorney races throughout the country amid movements to abolish bail and defund the police. Defund the police. But who have we got here? You've got the Philadelphia district attorney, that's Krasner. There's Kim Fox, Cook County state attorney. That's Gascon in Los Angeles County. And that was Chesa Bodine, whose parents were terrorists, by the way, domestic terrorists, whether underground. So how did that all go? And there's George Soros, please does punch that crazy people are going to get to wreck people's lives in the United States. Let's see. Is it fair to blame? This is from the Los Angeles Times, by the way. Is it fair to blame Gascon alone for LA's violent crime surge? Now, of course, it's the Los Angeles Times. They're going to take a sympathetic view of George Gascon, but they have to admit Yes, a violent crime surge. For some reason, lawmakers report says Philadelphia DA's policies are a factor in the crime rate. Larry Krasner apparently he is a factor in the crime rate there. Yikes. Let's see. Kim Fox defends record after surge in crime. Big surprise. Where did it all go wrong for Chesa Bodine? Where did it all go wrong for Chesa Bodine, San Francisco's ousted progressive DA? He actually got ousted. He was so bad. Even in San Francisco, I mean, you've got to be truly appalling. I mean, you have to. I didn't realize there was a too progressive in San Francisco. So it's the same story we've gone through. How did it go with these four funded by him? Terrible, 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 terrible. The only one left standing is Larry Krasner. He's the only one still left, and this is not that long ago. So there you go. Didn't work out well. Maybe that was by design. I don't know. Maybe it is by design, huh? Do you think it might be by design? These people are all crazy, and they did a terrible job, and crime went up. Is it possible that George Soros and his son, who is now actually taking the day-to-day running of it, is it possible they just have no idea what the outcomes are going to be after doing this for so long, pushing the same stuff for so long, the same ideology for so long? I don't think so. I think they know exactly what they're doing. I think they hate Western civilization. I think the people that are out in the street, some of whom are surely getting money somewhere down the line. It's dripping to them. It's trickling down to them from somewhere. Some of that Soros money has got to be trickling down to those people that are out burning cars in the street. It seems to me as if George Soros is trying to collapse the Western world and have a globalist, I think he has a globalist 1984 vision for the world. That seems to be what's happening here because everything he's doing is purely destructive. Report George Soros funds global fact-checking empire. You can see all the pies that he's got his fingers in, right? Immigration, social justice, equity, blah, blah. Misinformation, disinformation, fact-checking. The guy's not messing around. Over the past few years, a cottage industry, and this is from January 2023. Over the past few years, a cottage industry of fact checkers and misinformation experts has emerged to advance the left's mission of silencing dissent to its agenda around the world. Analysis of the funding of these organizations leads back to a familiar figure, left-wing billionaire George Soros. The New York Post broke down the trail of Soros's dollars, linking a global network of organizations intent on suppressing and discrediting conservative voices online. You will have heard of some of these. Here's one project of the Poynter Institute, specifically the International Fact-Checking Network. IFCN was launched in 2015 with its initial funding coming from the National Endowment for Democracy, backed by the U.S. State Department. U.S. State Department. There's a lot of connections between government and Soros and his money. The Omidyar Network, Google, Facebook, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and George Soros's Open Society foundations. So let's go to PolitiFact. PolitiFact, the Poynter Institute, fact checkers, right? Let's see. How good of a job are they doing? Let's see. They fact-check Donald Trump's statement. New York City mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani is a communist, and they've just got it straight up false. Straight up false. Now, if you read through this, as I have, there will be no mention of this. Let's listen to this.
What the purpose is about this entire project, it's not simply to raise class consciousness, but to win socialism, and obviously raising class.
So, class consciousness, first of all, there.
There are also other issues that we firmly believe in, whether it's BDS, right, or whether it's the end goal of seizing the means of production.
The end goal of seizing the means of production. Politico doesn't mention that he said that. You cannot divorce this from your fact check. PolitiFact, part of the Poynter Institute, funded by the Poynter Institute, funded by George Soros. Mario Nawfal, the Indivisible Project. So all of those cars burning in Los Angeles, they were a part of that. The Elon Musk protest, which was mostly apparently a boomers crusade for some reason, they're behind that. The Washington-based nonprofit received a staggering $7.6 million from Soros's Open Society between 2017 and 2023. Originally created to resist Trump in 2016, they've now published toolkits for nationwide Musk or U.S. protests. So I guess a good place to end this off was to revisit the very first thing we looked at. What did George Soros say?
President Trump is a con man and the ultimate narcissist.
Con man and the ultimate narcissist. The man who was responsible for Black Wednesday crashing the pound and hurting millions of people. Con man, the guy who made his money crashing the pound, damaging millions of people's lives, ruining millions of people's lives. That's the guy who calls Trump a con man and a narcissist. I think that's the face of evil. I think it's a bad person. I think everything he's doing, okay, so what is helpful exactly? What is good for Western civilization, or just civilization in general, about his efforts? Mass migration, we have just seen this causes nothing but problems, right? In many cases, it just causes tragedy. Censorship. He's funding censorship. He's funding biased partisan fact checkers. The purpose of that is to mislead the public. It's also these organizations worked, for instance, with the Biden administration to censor, to force like Facebook, as much as they had to force Facebook or Twitter or Google to censor anybody, but certainly that was the case. That doesn't feel like an open society. Open Society's foundation, to me, is exactly the same as anything else in woke world. The words mean the opposite of what they actually are, right? A bunch of far-left irresponsible DAs, and you have surges in crime. Guess what? That has real victims. Real human beings suffer because of this. I know who I think is the real con man and narcissist. What do you guys think? Anyway, that's all I'm going to say about that. Please like, share, and subscribe. Subscribing really helps me out. I thank you for that. I will see you next time.